We'll now move to the body of the presentation to talk about the history of the agroecology course at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, how we arrived at the teaching strategies we're using, and how we developed the principal competencies that we think are most important in the education of our future agroecologists.
So looking back at our early agroecology teaching, it was done in a fairly traditional manner, in the sense that we were concerned and were thinking about the role of ourselves as teachers, and we were concerned about how we could disseminate, give inputs of the agroecology topic, the content of agroecology to our students. And the means for doing this was, of course, by lecturing, which was what you had to do when you were involved in education. I think the main turning point in our whole operation was really when we started questioning our main focus, and we shifted the main focus from the agroecology, the topic of agroecology, sort of the subject matter, to the agroecologist, the students. And the consequence of this shift of focus was that we became less concerned about lecturing, and we started more to think about the learning process of the students. And that brought up this other question: how can we support that learning process? So this came up as a completely new way of thinking around education in our team. As part of this whole reorientation, the area of learning goals became important, and not only our learning goals as teachers and professors, but the learning goals that the students brought with them from many different countries and many different disciplines to our course. And we started exploring how can we sort of find common ground between our goals and their goals. And a natural question that comes up is, of course, what happens to agroecology then, the subject matter, when it doesn't any longer have the lead role on the educational scene. It doesn't disappear, of course, but it takes on another role. It becomes like a supporting character. If the main focus is the learning process of the students, then the role of the agroecology subject matter is to support that learning. So if we should sum up this whole shift of focus, this turn in how we developed our educational activities, one can say that it's in part a shift from the subject matter to the learner, the student. So from agroecology to the agroecologist. It might be easy to say, but it has sort of a profound paradigmatic implications. And it took us quite some time to develop the concrete activities that should accompany such a deep shift as shifting the main focus from agroecology to the agroecologist. Along with this is also this whole notion that it's not mainly the question of input in education, it's about learning outcome. And when you start talking about learning outcome, you're closer to the students, and you can start asking yourself, in what ways can we support the learning process of the students so that they can reach the learning outcome? When we started doing this, we by necessity had to leave a comfort zone of being lecturers in command of what was happening in the classroom. So we left the comfort zone and went into a zone of less comfort, you could say. But based on our experiences, and a challenging area, but a highly satisfactory and exciting area to be in as educators. So when moving from the zone of comfort to the zone of slightly less comfort and obviously much less control, there was a need for us to develop a map to help us orient ourselves and our students in the new learning landscape. And we had a couple of questions we used in helping us to create this new map. And the first one was really this question of in what ways can we educate agroecology students to become effective agents of change within the complex and changing area of farming and food systems. And the second question was, how can we help them to bridge between academia and the complex reality out in society? When we've asked these questions, we had to confront and decontextualize, decompose, deconstruct the traditional role of universities and the traditional goal of universities, which is to take the ignorant young students, provide them with knowledge, hoping that they can use this knowledge to support informed action. Because the challenge with this goal is that the hope is not based on research, because research shows that knowledge does not necessarily lead to action. We can talk about different kinds of knowledge, and if the knowledge is too much linked to mere theory, it's difficult to translate it into informed action in the meeting with complex situations on farms, in food systems. So that, as a result of this realization, we said that, okay, we will take this gap between knowledge and action and bring it into the educational activities, which means that you have to put students into situations where it's not just a question of accumulating knowledge, but where the action dimension is present. So taking it from there, we also had to address another traditional view of the relationship between university and society, which is kind of a linear relationship. And the belief there is that all new knowledge is developed by researchers, and it's transmitted to society to be taken up by farmers, by practitioners in the food system, and put into practice. So in deconstructing this linear notion of the relationship between academia and society, we rather could see this relationship being of integrating spheres between two areas, between academia and society. And so we've called this sphere a dialogue space. And when you enter this dialogue space of society and academia, and when we take our students there, then they can learn from the conversations and observations and interactions with stakeholders. So based on many years of experience of working with students and farming and food system stakeholders, we have identified, in addition to dialogue, 4 other competencies that seem to be vital for those who are active in the dialogue space to be effective operating in this area. And they are the competences of observation, of participation, of visioning, and of reflection. So this learning model has actually been instrumental in supporting our thinking and innovation of new activities in the agroecology course program over the past 10 years. So if we should sum up this whole reorientation in our educational activities, one thing that seemed very important is that in agroecology education, it seems vital that teachers, students, but also stakeholders on farms and in food system return to their immediate experiences of the life world they live in as the starting point for learning. So it's not a question of starting from theory, it's the question of how to develop knowledge and insight based on our immediate experiences. And if you follow up on this line of thought, then the farm is always larger than the theoretical representations we make of it. And this means that it's not the other way around, as it often is in education, that we start with theory and then we go on excursions to look at farms or fields. So you should never treat single farms as a mere examples of any agroecological theory or model, because the farm is always larger than the lens put up by us researchers to examine it. And this is interesting in an educational perspective, because then there is always more to learn. So it supports curiosity, and I think it has been the foundation for how we have dealt with, how we have worked together with our students over the past years.
We've learned that this is a learning process for us as well as our students. So now we'll talk about each of these 5 competences in the words of our teachers, but also in the words of some of our current students who shared their ideas after just a week and a half of the course in the autumn and their impressions of what these competences mean.